There are one-eyed men and there are two-eyed men. There are minds on a rip and minds on a rant. There are things as they are and things as they might be. See? Definition: man, life with the jitters. More grisly, gruesome, conspiratorial secrets gladly revealed. The ordinary notion for self-improvement actually came from the funeral industry once they realized the seasonal nature of their primary business. Economics. As long as the mind is driven by routine market forces, it will always feel as though it is in need of some repair. While a cat can look at a queen, only a feline with a cleared mind can resist her graces, come hithers, and hear kitty kitties. Once upon a time, there was a man who kept all prefaces and introductions to himself. What the normal juices of the mind tell you is thinking is not necessarily the final word on the subject. Well, sure, if you're ordinary it is. After all, isn't that what being ordinary is all about? A man asked himself, how many things has this been called? The mystical quest, the grand adventure, the glorious liberation, the great awakening? I wonder what life calls it. How the invented planet of civilization stays balanced. The civilized take civilization too seriously, while the uncivilized don't take it seriously enough. Yes. So, the civilized become overly civilized, and the uncivilized are seen as seriously under-civilized, and it all somehow works out. Moral: you can put the elephants at the front of the parade or you can put them at the end of the parade, but no matter what you do, everyone's eventually going to step in the dew. The mind is born in man already set on autopilot. Most meet death with it still struggling as best as possible. This is how it is, in spite of life making men believe they should expect more from their minds than they do their livers. Christ's course in seriousness: once you're fed, everything else is just a hobby. Even the few who truly believe that they want to go somewhere off the routine thoroughfares, even they damn near insist on being driven from the bus station by the titillating stings of sarcasm and hostile humor. Christ's course in disengaged mind: once you're fed, it all turns to crap. There are two distinct groups who believe that words have specific near magical powers: the extremely civilized and sophisticated, and the extremely not so. No need to ask a man with three eyes what he thinks of that. Even if you're not from another world, internally you should act like it. Men write books filled with great ideas so that others won't have to think about them. Earth, a.k.a. everyone's own hometown. Definition: the place you stay while you're figuring out where you really want to go. If you keep talking like everyone else, you'll keep thinking like everyone else. Might it also be correct the other way around? Yes, it could be said like that, replied the second voice. Is there not any assured truth in advertising concerning metaphysical ideas? No, it's not possible, the second voice added. And do you understand why we're even having this conversation? All sales in the civilized realm is like the pushing of smells to landfill employees. See, that's why everyone's face scrunches up when they get real whiny when trying to sell you something. Common sense on the hoof. In fact, extremely common. To be reasonably content in a herd, one needs stay abreast bovine fashion. One of our guys' revised personal motto: when in Rome, moo like a Roman, but get the hell out before they ask for milk. While they're working on the carousel, some of you might be able to hear this: that while expanded consciousness can be not improperly described as man's neural future speaking to him now, it could also be seen as his formerly silent genetic past finding a voice. It's almost impossible not to want to fix yourself up before moving on. Thus does man have religions, bus stations, and couches. Conflicting opinions, opposing views. That which you don't naturally think, someone else will. Someone else must. The one thing you can say about thinking is that there's always at least one more thing you can say about it. As they pretended to bury man, these words did they say. Ashes to ashes, thoughts to thoughts. Dust by never dying does life continue to live. To believe that being more conscious is strictly an ethereal, non-material concept and not a physical, chemical one is to be mistaken. To be of such an opinion will put you in quite sizable company, if only with your own thinking, for perhaps a lengthy time. Men concocted the theory of reincarnation because the theory of merry-go-round sounded so frivolous. Even at its best, the thinking of the collective is, to a more experienced person, a dumbing experience. If you live in the neural herd, they're always playing your song. The song of, come on, loosen up, give up and conform, believe us, it's easier that way. A hit right after Adam and still a fave today. The editor waved the late-breaking story and yelled at the young reporter, quick, get out in the street, it's important we get opinions on this. And the cub replied, no need, Chief, I have one already. The ideas your mind originally has are like someone who starts each day already half drunk. Books, the attempt to keep you from thinking. Education, the gang up on you attempt. The legend of the people who never heard anything is criticism. There is no such legend. One man's had a mechanical heart put in him just because he wanted to. Don't ask about his brain. Captain Irony is short a leg. There are two main categories in the general attempt to control the mind. Tortillas plain and tortillas even plainer. There is a little-told legend that says when raindrops of reality hit earth, they instantly change into beliefs and opinions. In read the certain mystical practices. How can you quieten the mind? By arguing with it. A man called up a psychiatrist and yells, help, you've got to help me. My conscious and unconscious minds have somehow merged and, my God, I'm suddenly me. Help! Blind thieves have no fear of burglar alarms. Don't you mean of security lights? Yes, those too. One man thought the strangeness of this kind of stuff is how unstrange and how similar to ordinary life it actually is. And yet, those who chase it and those who don't are almost like beings from two different worlds. The facts of the matter. You can tell people not to worry so much. You can tell them that they should worry more. You can tell them they should think about things more. And you can tell them they should think about things less. You can tell them that enlightenment is just around the corner, or you can tell them that it's far, far away. But the facts of the matter remain. The mystical journey reticketed. You can be weak on theory, but strong on practice. Or strong on practice, but weak on theory. But the one thing you cannot be is Baltimore bound, even on a bus so marked, if you're riding it with everyone else. Thought is cheap, but not as cheap as life, if you're a gazelle in the land of lions. Most men's thoughts are like gazelles in lion land. The ordinary mind, the noise everyone else's mind makes running through yours. There was once a man who only enjoyed definitions he didn't agree with. Our thought for yesterday. The dead are alive. They are the complainers among us. Clarification. The body is a fact, the mind an opinion. When ordinary thought leaves, it's like a home suddenly abandoned by a lifetime of rats, roaches, evil spirits, mildew, and assorted unwanted relatives. Definition: occult and New Age jargon. Psychobabble without a degree. In the practices to calm and clear the mind, success is in trying, not in succeeding. One man who fancied himself a writer entitled his life, "A Piece About Myself." Looking at his dog, a man thought, "There is no beauty like naturalness, and you've either got it or you don't." Rather than move to another city, one man decided to slip into a coma. If, in contrasting the physical and intellectual realms, civilization is the effort to codify the chaotic, then, moreover, mystical systems are the attempt to freeze and preserve sunshine. In reflecting on how he came to be where he is today, a man thought, had my genetic sentence had one less I dotted or T crossed, I might well have never had this interest in internal adventure. Alert travelers anxious to go do not wait by the gate for an external call, but realize their destination is continually spoken of by their own DNA. For a period of time, one man thought of a more conscious state of mind as being concentration without a focus. The beings of one world hold the idea that you only have truly begun to think when you no longer think about yourself. To kill a dragon is to kill half a dragon. The legend of one nightly band says that they think of being more conscious as being no longer driven by the urge to merge. The only useful death is death to the entire dragon. Out of all of the descriptions, here and there, now and then, of a different state, it has normally to the more routine, the drugstore, ordinary, run-of-the-mill would-be mystics, etc. It's always been, as it should be, described as indescribable, but then attributed to supernatural forces, because that is the easiest thing for the mind to do. If you're going to say something's indescribable, you've already stepped over the line to even say that. So after that, you just say, well, it was some gift from the God, some supernatural experience, and therefore it cannot be described. It is then what few times it has been taken in a temporal sense rather than a spatial sense. That is, rather than I had some experience that took me from this plane of consciousness, or to the more simple-minded, more childish-minded, the experience took me physically from somewhere into some sort of dream state, into physically, I was carried into the heavens. I was carried away by the spirit of the universe. The few times that they have made an attempt to mention it temporally, which are so few that I won't even try to give you an example. But it would have to do with the sorts of things that I read one tonight, again, that in a sense you could call being more conscious of that kind of experience as being man's neural future speaking to him now. It is a condition of the mind. It is a condition, an activity of the brain that is not now necessary, it is not now operative, and that's just one description. It was a different one, and it took it out of the spatial realm, which is more childlike. That is why that is the first thing that everyone does, all ordinary minds do with myths and legends and allegories. That is information that has not to do with simple market forces or trying to sell people something. That it's a little beyond, not better or worse unless you're interested in it, unless you're anxious for it, but it's more than the ordinary activities of civilization. So beyond that, anytime that the ordinary mind hears anything that sounds allegorical, they move it into, having to take it literally to some degree, they move it into spatial terms, believing that it has to do literally. If they heard a story about some kind of adventure that some philosopher, some prophet, some mighty mystical warrior made, it becomes a literal spatial adventure, that he actually went somewhere. Or that a Jesus, a Moses, had to go through all these horrendous spatial movements, that he actually went from a good place into captivity, into the hands of Philistines and evildoers, dunderheads, those of limited vision, heathens. And then he had to come out. He had to bring himself out and find the proper path again. Same with Buddha. And the more childish, the more simplistic of mind take it spatially. They do not take it temporally. I don't mean it's better or worse, but I'm trying to get you to see that even misusing, even taking the literal stories, the the metaphorical information about trying to do something with your own consciousness beyond the ordinary level, that the ordinary mind, even when these stories pop up, no matter where they came from is not the point, but it pops up in all religions and all mythologies, the ordinary then take it, if they're going to become popular and become part of that culture's folklore or that culture's religion, it goes into spatial terms. But there's another way of looking at it, which I have been trying to get you to consider, just to sort of shake things up, in temporal terms, to say that if we took the stories, all the religious stories, all the things about great adventures and some sort of mystical quest and going from here to there, if we stopped it and changed it from going from here to there, that we took it from going from right now to the future. Now again, ordinary minds will say, well, that just means that we're going to leave St. Louis today, and that perhaps sometime before we die, we will actually be in San Francisco. And they still try to make it spatially. It would have to be that you're beyond the matter of it being spatially in the sense that I'm going to live from here until I am 65 years old over there, or 70 years old. It has to be, in a sense, temporally, that transcends all time, because you have either got to do it now, whenever now is, or what's the use? It's a hobby. It's a dream. So in one sense it is, we can speak physically, that kind of experience, that one reasonable explanation would be that any kind of mystical experience, any kind of extraordinary personal experience would be the area of the brain, which is no doubt about the parts of the brain that seem to be some non-ballistic. They hadn't been hired yet. They hadn't been waked up. They haven't been fired up. They get a little blood, they get a little oxygen, even medical science, being hard up for a hobby, can poke around and stick on it and put wires to it, and it just seems to kind of... So we could spatially say that those kind of experiences, the extraordinary experiences wherein men see what the hell life's about, or they see things that they do not ordinarily see, that you could say that spatially, the neural activity that we call intelligence has moved into an area of the brain heretofore unused in that person. But you could also say, rather than just that, you could also say that it is tomorrow speaking, that it is man's future. Because wherever the parade's going, wherever life is going, it is marching through man, at least on this planet, which is the only business you got worrying about is this planet. Don't be worrying about UFOs and whether they're, aliens are becoming more conscious and looking after themselves. Trust me, you got your hands full here, so don't worry about them. But it would be man's future inside of you, talking to you. It would not just be spatially. You could say that it is the future speaking to man, because wherever the parade's going through man, if there's an activity then, physically, if we go back spatially, in your brain, that now begins to speak to someone through that experience, then it is simply speaking. If it's an area of the brain now in use, that means someday in the future it will be used. That is where it's all marching toward. So you can see that it is temporal also, that it is the future speaking. Let's assume that I talked about that sort of thing for another 15 minutes and just skip on through it, just establish it, because we've talked about it enough before without making it the necessary identifiable focal point of the evening, that you should consider that literally that is a very fair description of understanding anything extraordinary about life, to be able to turn around and to see what's going on in a way that's just absolutely extraordinary, unopinionated. It's beyond any polarized personal bias. It's beyond the ordinary workings of the mind. It's beyond the internal running commentary. You just turn around and see things that you have never seen. That is seeing the future. It does not mean it's the only future, and it is not in any way a form of ordinary prognostication. Because when you look at it, it's not something like seeing who's going to win the lottery next week, what the number is going to be, or who's going to win the third at Hialeah tomorrow. It's of no consequence. But it is at that time that you saw beyond the present. Because the present would be what everyone else is thinking. The present would be whatever the bovine fashion is of the collective at this time, which can make you comfortable, can make life tolerable if you're ordinary, but can make it intolerable if you're not ordinary. Well, I shouldn't say intolerable. Weary. Hungry. Malnourished. So we could say, I could turn it into a whole school of thought in some way, that the whole thing of any kind of extraordinary experience is man's mind, literally. It's the future of man's mind speaking to a person, an individual now. Let's take that in some way that you took that one, yeah, that's a new way, or that is it. That's even a better way than, even if that's an allegory of an allegory, that's even better than the idea of spatial. It in some way the experience transports man into other physical realms, even internally. That it just physically he goes into a different plane of psychic vibrations or something. That it is the actual future of man speaking to him neurally, or the neural future of man speaking to that person. That is one way of putting it. But to muck it up a bit, there was one in here that said not only could you see it that way, but you could also see it in another way that is not normally talked about. You could see it as being man's formerly silent genetic space finally finding a voice. Last time we met, I slipped in several times about life's parade and etc. And toward the end of the night, there was a item that said to see more of the parade that is life. To view more of the parade that is life, you have got to be able to see, or you've got to look above everyone else's head. That was it, more or less. Assuming that you caught the picturization, that there it is of life itself, just the whole schmear of life, human existence, going by, and for you to ever see more than what it is, you have got to see above everyone else's head. Which in the same way, if it was a physical parade, that if you're going to see the full parade without doing all this, looking under people's elbows and all this, the way to actually see it is you've got to get above their head and to see it. That would be similar to raising oneself up physically inside the brain to an area not used and having that kind of extraordinary insight, that kind of experience. Again, it would fit into my picturization of it being the neural future of man speaking to him now. But there is also a way that would seem to be literally, and then it's sliced spatially, but literally, which is how words normally seem to work, that I could put it to you another way, that rather than it just being the neural future of man speaking to him now would be his formerly silent genetic past finally finding a voice. Let's recount again for a second that anybody that's going to any sort of effort, doesn't it, this day and time, not just because I made it up, but doesn't it strike you better, the idea that it's the future of man? That whatever it is you can see, it's inside of you, not necessarily the specific future so that you can pick the number tomorrow or the dog races, but that it is anything that you see, anything that you begin to understand of an extraordinary nature of your own, it is like the neural future. Because it's not right now. It's never that, although the historical mystical literature does not recount it on that basis. But if you see what's going on now, well, that's nothing. You haven't seen anything. You might as well be a philosopher. You might as well be back on dope, drugs, alcohol. Because what's going on now is of no consequence. Not to a man trying to see something. The only thing that's of any interest is the future. Again, no, people do not normally describe it this way. other than just routine would-be mystics who are interested in telling the future and all that, but they can call up dial a psychic or something. I'm talking about someone who is actually making some effort. It would seem to be that the correct description is it's the future. I mean, it's not some throwback. It's not a regression. It can't be. It's only children that believe that. Yeah? But if it can be described as the neural future of man speaking to him now, to an individual, speaking to him now, it could also be his formerly silent genetic past finally finding a voice. Ordinary people, an ordinary mind, if it even attempted to follow this, would say, we would hear it as being absolutely contradictory, that you can't have it both ways. It would sound as though the second possibility would be in direct contradistinction to the kinds of things we've been saying, that would be some sort of throwback. But would it? What if it was? What if the mystical experience, what if all this extraordinary internal adventure that some people insist upon or insist upon trying, were it not something of the future of man neurally speaking to him, that it was his formerly silent genetic past finally finding a voice? If you can follow that without it turning into a literal seesaw, without turning into literal polarized fodder in a 3D world, the genetic past, which was silent, if it did now find a voice, would not simply be any longer subject to the limitations of the word past. Because you got to remember, DNA don't die. DNA does not have a past. If you can't die, you got no past. If you can't die, you got no future. The genes that are man, I mean, you know that. They don't die. They ride you for a while, the bus breaks down, they have to finally junk you. I don't know what DNA, if it could talk, it might say that you're fairly decent, but what the hell? Every time the car that you've got, when it finally just absolutely wears out and you have to junk it or trade it in or just park it and go off and leave it, if you're sane at all, you don't go kill yourself, and probably most of you don't even look back. That's it. That's DNA. It has no future, it has no past, not compared to the temporal state of man. So if DNA, if our silent genetic past did find a voice in you, could begin to talk, then the idea of whether it's the past or the future talking becomes, at the absolute brilliant extreme of the word, it becomes moot. Well, I can beat that. It becomes indistinguishable. Well, which is actually moot. The past and the future has no longer any bearing. But would that not still constitute, by anybody's imagined definition, assuming you've never had the experience, but just if you followed it under reasonable, literate rhetorical terms, would that not sound as though it would qualify as a real mystical experience if suddenly the DNA of man, you could hear it talk? I mean, just if you want to sit there a second and think of all the strange movies and TV shows and science fiction and drug-induced hallucinations you've had, compared to them, if that still does not qualify as, ooh, that could be spooky, then I don't know what your idea of extraordinary is. To say it's the childish, well, the more childlike the minds dream of an external calling of the buses. And there's one here about real travelers do not simply wait by the gate to be called, which another way I could have said they do not wait by the gate for a beatific call. They do not wait for apparently the sounds of God to call them, bus so-and-so going so-and-so, or what many people hope, that they will not just call that bus now going so-and-so, that they will call your name. Yeah. That the gods call you special mission, special bus. All right, but that is the general dream. That is the basis of much of religion, but is the basis of most of the routine dreams of metaphysical, mystical experiences and interest in things extraordinary is that will be some kind of external input, that there is something I am now severely, or something I'm lacking, and it will come to me either through information I get from somebody or the gods or the universe or some kind of cosmic vibrations will give it to me. So it sounds extraordinary. And it has to all of you at some time, the idea to believe that an Abraham, a Muhammad, a Buddha, anybody that in some way, God, the creator of the universe, the voice of the universe, the Big Bang, the big kazoo himself, in some way actually spoke to a guy, to a human. No, you got to admit, if the universe would take time out of its busy day, life itself, to speak to a guy, well, you got to be impressed. Either that, or if you're not impressed by that, you probably got your own TV talk show anyway. If you wanted to talk to God, you'd have had your agent invite him. So, at any rate, the point was you have got to imagine that, the whole idea that whatever your idea of a God was, or the God, but for him to actually talk to a human, it's got to be a big deal. It's extraordinary. But that's always something outside, which is fine. That's part of, it's the comfort of fairy tales, it's the comfort of family, to believe that Big Daddy's somewhere, Big Mama, somebody's going to hug you, somebody go, that's all right, I'm out here, the bears won't get you in the woods. So that sounds to be, and I'm not just making fun of it, that would sound to be the extraordinary, the epitome, the supreme example of some sort of comfort through information or some kind of extraordinary supernatural comfort would be outside. Because the fear, the uncertainty people feel, you feel like that's all me. The uncertainties, the fears when you're a kid, you can be 50 years old and still be a kid. No surprise there, is there? But the fear and the uncertainty is in you. Therefore, ergo, it is only natural that the feeling of some potential assistance, some help, some comfort, some protection, some defense is where? External. It's not to make fun of it. At that basis, a feeling that the problem, the fear, the uncertainty is in me, then therefore you don't have to analyze it. There is no philosophical basis for a dispute on that level. Then there is no other potential. There is no other possibility than if there is help, it's out there. And plus that makes it feel better. If you follow what I'm saying, because if I suddenly grabbed all the people in the world of that persuasion, which is almost everybody, and so wait a minute, there could be protection in you. It might not all be out there. Even if I got them to go, well, maybe so, they still wouldn't feel better for it. They would feel lesser for it. It's easier to think. And not just in some metaphysical level. It's easier to call up a doctor and ask him to set your broken finger or your broken toe, and he might say, well, setting toes won't do much, and I can kind of straighten it out and wrap some tape around it, to tell you the truth, but you could do it yourself. Would you do it? Now, you must know what I'm talking about. It's not foolishness. I'm just trying to make you see this, not just at the level of thinking that there are gods out there. If your car's not, well, you surely know. To feel like that you have had an input of assistance from outside of you under many, many ordinary conditions seems to be superior. Even if you literally, theoretically, agreed if the doctor says, well, setting toes, the broken toes, it's really a misnomer to say we set them. All you got to do is kind of stay off of it, and if it's not if it's not turned upside down or cracked, just stay off of it. Wrap a little tape around it, kind of encourage it, but you don't really set toes. There's just not enough bone there. Do it yourself. And you go, well, all right, I know. And maybe you run, look in the dictionary or near your home medical, and you look at the bones. You go, well, you're right, but couldn't you do it for me? It's the same sort of thing as having your mother. Put a little something on there. You could have put mercurochrome or something on there, but let's do it. All right. And it's not just silly. It has to do with the tangled dance of life itself. So people they do, without analyzing it, enjoy without any analyzation. But if I tried to take it away, if someone could take it away or point out to them that could be changed, they wouldn't want it changed. To feel that if the uncertainty, if the fear is in me, ooh, my finger hurts, and the fear's in me, or the kid's there in bed and he hears a noise at night and he thinks, it is a vampire outside. It is a bear in the woods. And you want to call mama, daddy, somebody, doctor. You want to call somebody and say, I heard something. And they go, oh, no, it's not. That's a wind. No. Really? Yes. Go back to bed. And you feel better. But you could say, all the way from religion to sing your little toll to hearing noises at night, you could say, well, wait a minute. A person could tell themselves, they could go look out there and say, well, there's no bears out there. There's no vampires. Oh, look at the tree. It's blowing against the house in the wind. That's what it is. You call your father or your mother, they come tell you the same thing, but it's not the same. Not at the ordinary level. You didn't lose your place, right? No, I didn't lose my place. So the idea of extraordinary experience being externally based, that it is info from without. And it is, I want to keep tying it in, not just spatially, remember, but now I'm tying that into in a sense, a small step forward, or at least off the beaten path, that it's not just spatially, it can be seen as temporal. That this kind of external information, this kind of input that comes from some supernatural source, whether it be a guru in a cave somewhere or from God himself, some spiritual message you got, it would seem to be, once I point out, have to do with the future. We could even divide up at the ordinary level. They don't do this, but surely you see, I just want to make sure that you see that there is a point. It's subtle and it's not of any normal consequence in life. That's why it's hard to get the grip what I'm saying, that it has any significance. The pointing is always toward the future of these kind of experiences. And it would fit in, we could even divide up, I started to say, even with simplistic people. If they would listen for a second, we could divide up their idea of good forces in life, the good, the gods, the angels, the side of goodness and justice and mercy, and then all the evil spirits and the demons. We could divide them up into the gods, the good gods and all that, are stalwarts or defenders, promoters of the future. And what people have ordinarily called demons and evil spirits, all that is simply man's past. And I could get people, ordinary people could hear, yeah, you're right. Because man's future, the goodness of man, since he is not perfect, ordinary people would say that, the most religious of them will say, yes, that's true, certainly we're not perfect. So if we're struggling, what are you, sir? And he could say, well, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Jew, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a humanitarian, I'm a rational humanist, whatever it is. He says, I'm trying to do better by pursuing some mode of thought, by pursuing some system. But are you perfect now? Are you what you should be? Are you a real perfect person? No, certainly not. But you are working on it. Oh yes, that's what makes my life, it gives the spice to life. It gives me some reason to live. So it's always in the future. So you could get people to hear that the idea of good and evil, good forces, bad forces, is in a sense the whole parade of civilization, the whole parade of man becoming more and more civilized. The ordinary have always called it more spiritual, but that is, if he is going to get better, yes, I hope he is, or we're all trying to. I try my best to, and I encourage others to. But they're not perfect now. Oh, no. And you're not perfect. No. But you hadn't given up. Oh, no. You got to work on it. So it goes, you understand there. After that, they might not see it in great significance, but you have to say, all right, do you see that whole idea of goodness and good forces in life is referring to the future? And contrary, the whole ideas of Satan, Lucifer, evil spirits, demonic forces are what? They're outdated forces. They're things pulling on the parade. They're things trying to stop the humane progress of man. I'm sure they would hear, well, yeah, you could call it that. That the fast is evil. There is your demonic forces. There is evil. And up here is good. And so we're kind of in the middle. That's why, goodness, people keep saying, well, if God's around or life's supposed to be good, how come it ain't good now? Because now's now. Which I won't bother to say whether they'd hear that or not. They'd go, huh? So it could be, people could see, and I'm trusting you're going to see, that not only the idea of just religion, the idea of man becoming more humane, more civilized, is a matter of the future. Whether someone said that they had an actual mystical experience that seemed to fit my description, that it would be the neural future of man speaking to him now, they don't have to have that. I could just say the whole idea of man becoming better, yes, they'd say, is a pointing to the future. Yes. And I could say even as far back, as long as it is, we could find the words of Confucius, of a Buddha. We could find words 3,000 years old of Christ, anybody. And I could say, can you do that? Can man do that? Or can you do that? And the person would go, well, no, certainly not. In fact, I try to live a kind of Buddhist life. I've read it and I am very in favor of it. Yes, but can you do it? No. So what he was talking about 3,000 years ago still is not routinely possible. No, you're right. It's always a pointing toward the future. So they go, okay, I can hear that. Then it would have to be, right on the surface, very questionable for it to be brought up that, well, wait a minute, there's no way to look at it. That kind of encouragement of man, that kind of the basis of mystical, extraordinary information, we've just established is always some kind of pointing to the future. Yes. But how about this? It could also be man's previously silent genetic past finally finding a voice. You got to look over the heads of everyone else to see the parade. You got to see into the future. Except, what if all these voices of God, all these mystical experiences, rather than it being simply left at, even my own description, the neural future of man speaking to him now. Ooh. What if it is the formerly silent genetic past of man finally finding a voice? That would not be extraordinary, you don't think? I mean, leave it to ordinary children now to think, boy, it'd be extraordinary if I fell into some kind of religious stupor and suddenly a voice went, hey, this is God, and I'm going to give you the secret message you always wanted. And everybody go, woo! That would qualify as strange, extraordinary, and turn off the TV set, mama, I found what I was looking for. It would fit any description you want. But how about this? Whatever this might mean. Now, you're used to hearing those kind of terms about God speaking to people. I mean, it's now such a part of the collective rhythm, the constant hit parade of the religious and non-religious that makes people don't even hear it. But to say, wait a minute, instead of it being that kind of extraordinary thing of the God speaking to you, and it's like the future of man, whether it be through God himself or through these people like the Buddhas and etc. Instead of that, what if? No, but see, that seems to make sense to people that don't even believe. If I say, well, you know what I mean if people say that God spoke to them. And we could have nice, intellectual, sophisticated, clean-cut atheists here and go, well, I don't believe in God. And I can say, yeah, but you know what I mean. I go, oh, yeah, well, I know what they think they mean. Like, so there's no doubt that you know what they think they mean when they talk about God spoke to me. And if they're very sophisticated and well-read, they'd probably go, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I can describe that having to do with the brain chemistry of man and sleep deprivation and probably drugs. No. All we want is you to agree that you know, oh, sure, I know what they think they mean. I want you to see that is common currency. You don't have to say that I want any of it. But everyone knows what it means, what other people think they mean, that God spoke to me. Who's ever heard of the genes of man speaking? Because I don't know, somewhere in science fiction by now somebody may have said it. So I'm not playing with that game. But I'm saying insofar as the philosophical, not just the mainstream, but just any of the fairly known historical, would-be mystical currency in literature, where has that ever popped up? Nowhere. It's very hard to hear because to begin with you try to think, wait a minute, instead of talking about the intellect talking to you, that's where all of man's future is, then it sounds as though we have almost gone backwards by the own kind of maps and descriptions we've been laying out here, that you're talking about now back to a lower level. Instead of looking over people's heads on the parade, we've now gone in some other direction. And you're saying, but down there where it was always silent, are you insinuating now that if that spoke, that could be as extraordinary, it in fact could perhaps be the same thing as up here, pointing to the future, is what would seem to be the past, now suddenly can talk? I refer you back. 2, if you do not die, the genes of man do not die. Now you know that. The DNA does not, they can bury it with you. But it'll hang on there, it's in no hurry, it's not going anywhere. It can hang on there as long as it wants to, but it is going nowhere. It is not dying. You have rusted, they have mashed you up along with an Etzel and turned you into some kind of little cube to recycled you, and you're now a 6-pack or 12-pack of Miller Draft Ice. But the genes, the DNA has gone nowhere. It does not die. It was not born with you. Everybody knows that. It has no past. The whole idea, and space, that's not even worth talking about. But time would seem to be, in the sense that I was trying to bring it up tonight, comparably speaking, would seem to be a bit more complex. But not only does space mean none to DNA, because it can live in you, it can live in her, it can live in him, it can live in a tree, it can live in a dog, it can just lay in the ground. I hate to speak for DNA. I mean, they can find traces of DNA. They can find things now, supposedly, 1 million years old. And they can still dig it's just laying there. Where's it going? So, and maybe that wasn't all the DNA that was in the Tyrannosaurus or whatever it was. But it's just part of it. Some of the DNA left. It's like they decided after it died 10 million years ago, some of the DNA, I don't know, I'm just making this up, maybe laid around for, let's say, 1 million years. And part of the DNA to the other part went, damn, I need some exercise. And it might have got up from where that Tyrannosaurus Rex was. And part of them went, well, we'll see you around. The rest of them laid there and, we could start making it up forever, and then 2 million years later, some of the others went, I wonder where them other guys went. They ever come back? No. Well, I think we'll go off I'm going to go look for them. And maybe the DNA that didn't leave go, well, if you come back this way, well, let me know what happened. See if there's anything. But the point is, Tim, some of it's still there. Space means nothing. DNA does not care where it is. It makes no difference. But then to apparently look at it from a more complex way, again, back to my opening, would be to go to think about it temporally. Does it mean anything time-wise? If you're not going to die, there is no such thing as time, literally. I mean, of course, there's always the built-in safeguards of, if you don't know the word for something, etc. But if DNA, we should perhaps be getting a little closer to truth in advertising and not keep dismissing DNA, such as, well, if it could talk. I mean, that's easy to say because you don't normally hear it, but to just say, if it could talk, or me say it, and you nod along, like, oh yeah, I know what that means. In the same way I know what it means that, well, God spoke to somebody. Yeah, I know what it means. At any rate, if DNA could talk, it would, or you would, if you could talk for it, if you tried to imagine, you would have to see that, in the sense I was opening this up, that time would be more complex than space. But literally, if you're not going to die, and you weren't born, there is no such thing as time, even if we could get DNA to speak to us. If I could bring some out, if I could scrape some, and I knew how to, if I could do it and put the microphone, I could make DNA talk, and I said, do you know what we mean by time? And it could say, yeah. I mean, because anything you know, I mean, if you think you got secrets from your own DNA, then perhaps you should be with that man who called up the psychiatrist screaming for help, that his conscious and subconscious mind had somehow merged, and he needed help. If you remember what he said happened to him, he was very specific, that they had somehow merged. DNA would know. Let's just go along with it. If you could tell you, would you know what we mean by time? And your DNA would know exactly. It means, oh, you're talking about when you're going to die. You're going to fall down, and I'm going to have to finally jump off you. And I'm going to finally have to go find another bus. You're going to die if it's your DNA. And you go, yeah, that's time to it. I mean, it's not its time, but that is the way that would understand that you mean by time. But if you're not going to die, there's no such thing as time. Now back to where we were. If you see that, and it's not philosophical and it's not theoretical, it is just beyond the mainstream of life's general parade. But just because everyone else tells you the parade's going down Fifth Avenue, now I know everybody else on this planet, just about, is over there watching it. And if they're not, they know where it is. If you ask them, oh, well, I had to come over here and get something to eat, but the parade's over there. That may not be the only parade going, but if DNA did talk, if it found a voice in you, any idea of whether what you understood was from the future or the past, you do understand the word moot or irrelevant. Moot is just nice and short, and moot just means, that whatever you're talking about has no relevance, no pertinence to what you're talking about. But it's normally used as though it sounds like it does. Or else you wouldn't have brought it up, assuming it was a conversation between two relatively sane people. One person talking about one thing, and the other person listening goes, well, but doesn't that kind of imply or bring about so-and-so? And it would seem to sort of fit. And then the first person goes, well, not the way I understand it, not the way I mean it. What you just said is moot. But the only reason that would normally be brought up would be that both of them, are relatively sane, and they believe they're talking about something, or at least the second person does, that is without any doubt in some way connected. And the first guy says, well, I think that the nature of man or the nature of life is blah, 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 blah. And the second guy goes, well, yeah, but doesn't that bring up so-and-so? And he brings up something about religion or who knows what. And the first guy goes, what he means is, I know what you mean. I know why you say that. But he goes, oh, that's moot. He doesn't say it's insane. I could make up an example, but I was wanting you to go ahead and do your own. To bring up moot, what it means is, well, yeah, you would think it is. In ordinary people, the majority of mankind would be hollering, waving their little moot flags. And I'm telling you it's not moot. And normally, that'd be the end of my little conversation if I wrote out, because that leaves the second guy having to go. The second guy playing the part of ordinary sane humanity. That is what would happen if the genetics of man spoke to an ordinary person. The idea of God speaking, the idea of something far away spatially, which would make it far away in the future, in a sense, could also be seen as being far away in the past. Because insofar disregarding the ideas of the universe having a life and death, and that's fine mathematical equations. But as far as you're concerned, the universe has no life and death. It certainly didn't have a life. When you got here, it was here. You ask your mama, was life here when you were here? Yes. And your grandmother said the same. You check your history books, as far back as they got written history, people were writing on cave walls or making little notes on the barks of trees, and they were saying, in essence, that the universe was here. So it's always been here. The idea of there being a time has to be on a local basis, and a local basis is defined by dying. And if the genes of man could talk in you, it would be just as extraordinary, I am suggesting most strongly. It'd be as mystical, as metagnostic, as metaphysical, as blown away as the more simplistic idea that it's the God speaking to us from afar. I repeat again, that is comforting, it is fun, it is not just silly, and there's no need to hear it as being a sarcastic detailing of it. It is comforting all the way from being a child to asking someone else, tell me it's all right, tell me it's all right. And your parents want to say, well, you could look out the window and see it's the wind blowing. You know it's all right. Yeah, but you tell me. Okay, it's all right. Okay, I'll go to bed. That's the way life is. That's the whole idea, that the metaphysical, some extraordinary experience, is out there. What could be more not out there than your own DNA? Your own DNA is closer to you than, you're big boys and girls, it's closer to you than what you think of as your personality. See, because your personality, in case you hadn't thought about lately, can be mucked with quite a bit. Others can muck with it. You muck with it. You get real mad, you take a drink, have a little caffeine, have a little alcohol, a little pot. You're constantly mucking with personality. And other people, as I said, they can muck with it real easily. There's one thing that they can't muck with, nobody, is your DNA. Which is, getting off a side step right here at the end again, is one of the little humors, or one of the laughs showing that it has a sense of humor again. It's very close to, or it's in the same ballpark with people now concerned about AI. That we're going to invent, we're going to come up with computer programs and the hardware and the software, artificial intelligence that is going to be so intelligent, it will take over, it will become smarter than us. And people even see, God forbid, they're saying there could be moral implications in this. I mean, it's enough that there are moral implications in abortion, serious moral, but there are also moral implications in, nowadays, this sounds a little more high class and sophisticated, moral implications. Raging battles going. We're talking about people with degrees behind their names. Raging battles over the moral implications of genetic engineering.
Yeah.
That is, if indeed we do start mucking around, not with your genes, because you can't do it individually. Anyway, you know the idea that, wait a minute, we can't let this happen. We've got to pass laws. We've got to stop this now. We're trying to play God. Which, after that, it's just one step to destroying the earth. Oh, my God. Well, as hard as it is for man to hear DNA laugh, if there's any chance, or to speak, I was going to say is, you could start off trying to hear it laugh by periodically listening to what is serious in life. Of the anti-abortionist, so seriously, so gravely, speaking out on behalf of life, that life, one of the catchphrases now is, life, what a beautiful choice. You know, as opposed to having an abortion, encouraging pregnant women to go on and deliver the little nipper, you know, that life, and they, you know, will look, I'm sure, sincere as much as they can in print ad, almost has tears on billboards. Life, what a beautiful choice. And I mean, just knowing how much life appreciates that, or, you know, save the planet. And you can just see all those big trees and volcanoes and mountains down in those poor rainforests in Brazil going, oh, please, you know, don't hurt us anymore. Or the planet itself, thinking, well, at least there are a few right-thinking humans up there that will help look after us. That's the same people that call out, Daddy, Daddy. And they can be 50 years old. And they're calling out for the head of the department. They're teaching. They're on tenure themselves. And they're hollering, Daddy, Daddy, come over here. And they won't know, what's that noise outside? It sounds like a conflicting opinion to that latest paper I wrote on the chemistry, on the chemistry of nuclear fission. What is that noise outside? And the head of the department comes in. Oh, don't worry about that. That's some nobody from a state college, from a state university. That paper, that'll never get passed around. Don't worry about that. Throughout all of that, as hard as it is to hear DNA talk, I was going to say, at least you might hear every now and then just the chuckle. I mean, DNA's got nothing else to do, it's just riding along. But to hear a man's personality, the part up here that would seem to be the singular, the forward-looking part, speaking out about how we must save the planet, disregarding what the planet does to us, but how we must save the planet, how we must look after the best interests of life. And to see if DNA, even though it has no calendar, I admit it, if DNA does not find almost every day to be April the 1st. Do not discount. We got any tape left? Do not discount DNA talking. And there is a great deal of difference, I know I ended up in the last few seconds, between what would seem to be the idea of one's future in the widest possible metaphysical sense of the experience, these extraordinary experiences being the neural future of man speaking. But as far as there being some great difference between that and the past, when you get to the level that there is no death, the genetic level, the idea that the past speaking, and to say, well, that would simply be the past speaking. Oh, yeah? Now, the past speaking, what would normally be the past speaking is reading words of humans. That's the past speaking. Of saying, well, at one time man was so-and-so. There's not been much written after the fall from grace. That was when man fell off each other's shoulders, and they couldn't see over the parade anymore. I'm glad I say that to them, but down lower, the idea that the past, if it could speak, to take the term I'd already used tonight, if it was man's formerly silent genetic past, now finding voice, to say that his formerly, that it's silent, that's the past, and they call that the past, then you are stuck at parade level. Because that would be as extraordinary as you can imagine. And I'm suggesting most strongly that that may be, in fact, a reasonable description of what the great experience is.